Hello everyone, I am Mr. Night Truth. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and let's go down into the story.
Story number 1. If I told you that I never meant for them to die, would you believe me? No, of course you wouldn't. But here's the thing. What happened on the Orpheus wasn't an accident, and it wasn't exactly murder either. It was something in between. You want to know how it began, don't you? The funny thing is, it didn't begin in the ocean or in some haunted trench. It began under fluorescent lights, in a room so sterile it made my skin itch. People assume the horror started when the hull groaned, or when the sonar picked up what it shouldn't have. But no, the horror started with a pen, a contract, and a lie I told myself. The letter came folded in crisp military precision. Classified assignment, high compensation, submersible operations. Most men would burn through the details and sprint to the signature line. Me, I read every word, twice. Still, even then, something in the phrasing unsettled me. Expendable personnel coverage, posthumous benefits assured, words that didn't belong in a standard contract. I didn't tell you the truth earlier, not all of it. I'd been out of service for 3 years when the Navy called me back. They didn't want me, at least not for my rank. They wanted me because I'd been down there before. That's the part I didn't mention. Not to the papers, not to the debrief board, not even to my own family. I had been to the trench before, and I swore I would never go back. The officer who handed me the file didn't speak much. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in weeks. His uniform was pressed, but his eyes betrayed him, hollow, restless. He slid the folder across the desk and said only, "Commander Barnes, this is an opportunity few would refuse. Consider it carefully." He didn't look me in the eye when he said it. That's when I should have known. And then there was Dr. Langford. They brought him in as if to sweeten the deal, though it had the opposite effect. His handshake was dry, mechanical, as if he had rehearsed being human, but never quite perfected it. His smile never reached his eyes. He said he was a marine biologist, but every word sounded scripted, polished to the point of sterility. I'll admit, he unnerved me. He talked about hydrothermal vents and unrecorded species with a fascination too sharp, too eager. But when I asked him about the risks, about pressure and survival at that depth, he deflected. He said, "Pressure is only dangerous if you don't respect it. We intend to respect it." Then he chuckled. I don't know why, but that laugh stuck with me. It wasn't humor, it was hunger. You're waiting for me to tell you I refused, aren't you? That I walked out, told them to find someone else. That's what a sane man would have done, but I didn't. I sat there, staring at that contract, and I signed it. Why? Well, that's the question I've asked myself every night since. Part of it was the money, yes. I won't pretend otherwise. The compensation was obscene, enough to buy silence from anyone who might have objected. But there was something else too, something gnawing at me, something I won't admit outright. The truth is, I wanted to go back, to see if what I remembered from before had really happened, or if it was just the tricks of pressure and a fatigued mind. You see, I left something down there years ago. Or maybe it left something in me. Either way, I couldn't resist the pull. Langford studied me carefully as I signed, like he was taking notes not on my name but on my weakness. He said, "Excellent choice, Commander. You'll make history." The way he said history, it sounded less like discovery and more like a tombstone inscription. When I left the office, the corridor felt colder than when I'd walked in. My footsteps echoed too loudly, like the place was empty, though I knew it wasn't. I told myself the unease was nerves, nothing more. but you can lie to yourself only so many times before the lie rots. Later that night, in my quarters, I studied the file again. Pages of diagrams, sonar readings, technical notes, all of it carefully worded, all of it incomplete. No mention of previous expeditions, though I knew they existed. No mention of casualties, though there had been plenty. Instead, phrases like ongoing anomalies and biological irregularities. Polished jargon to mask fear. I'll confess something else. I wasn't just unsettled, I was afraid. But fear has a strange way of disguising itself. It can feel like excitement, like inevitability. It can even feel like duty. That night I dreamed of the deep. Not the calm, endless blue you see on postcards. No, I dreamed of a blackness so complete it ate the light. I saw shapes moving, not swimming, but crawling, dragging themselves along the trench walls with grotesque grace. And in the dream, they were looking for me. Not the Orpheus, not the crew. Me. When I woke, my pillow was damp with sweat. My hands shook, and still. When the phone rang at 0600 with instructions for deployment, I answered with a steady, "Yes, sir. Do you understand now? The mission wasn't a surprise. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice, my choice, and I made it, even though every bone in my body screamed to walk away." There's one more thing you should know before I move on. Langford, during our first conversation, said something I've never forgotten. I didn't mention it to the investigators because, well, I didn't want them asking questions I couldn't answer. He leaned close, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. He said, "It's not about finding life down there, Commander. It's about making sure life doesn't come up. Do you see now why I couldn't resist? Do you see why I signed? I thought stupidly that I could control it. That I could be the one man to look into that abyss and not blink. And maybe, in some way, I still believe that. But if I'm being honest with you, and I've tried to be, though I'm sure you've noticed the gaps, I think I signed not to control it, but because some part of me already belonged to it. And that's the truth, or close enough to the truth for tonight. The Orpheus was waiting, and we were going back. Chapter ends, leading into the descent. You ever notice how silence can be louder than noise? Inside a submarine, you learn that fast. Every creak of the hull, every groan of steel under pressure, it isn't just sound. It's a countdown, a reminder that the ocean isn't a place you visit. It's a place that swallows you whole. The Orpheus was a monster in its own right, sleek, steel, teeth hidden behind layers of rivets and classified design. They told me it was built for research, but nothing about it felt scientific. The corridors were too narrow, the reinforced hull too thick, the air too cold. It felt less like a laboratory and more like a coffin, dressed up with blinking lights and sonar screens. Deployment was quick, too quick. We slipped out of harbor under grey skies, waves smashing against the bow like fists trying to drag us back. The captain, though funny thing, I barely remember his face, gave a terse order and we began our descent. I should remember him, shouldn't I? The man in command? But when I try to picture him now, there's just a blur, a uniform with no features. Maybe that's convenient. Maybe I've chosen to forget. Langford, though, I remember too well. He spent most of the first hours glued to a console, scribbling notes in a language that wasn't quite English, or maybe it was just science dressed in numbers. His lips moved when he read, whispering like he was reciting a prayer. When I asked what he was studying, he smiled that same too-polished smile and said, "Patterns." Patterns of what? He didn't answer. The crew. I should mention them, at least the ones I can still recall. There was a young sonar officer, Harris, barely 20, with eyes too big for his face. He kept glancing at me like he wanted reassurance, though I never gave it. Then there was Diaz, the engineer, a skeptic. He didn't trust Langford, didn't trust the mission, and if I'm being honest, didn't trust me either. Sometimes I wonder if he figured it out first, what we were really doing down there. We descended past the sunlit layers, past the twilight zone where fish glow like lanterns in the dark. The deeper we went, the more the world above felt like a myth. Pressure mounted, thick and invisible, until even breathing felt like disobedience. That's when the sound started, not the groans of metal, not the hum of machinery, something else. A tapping, faint at first, like fingertips brushing the hull. Harris reported it on sonar. Irregular pings, echoes that didn't match our own. He said, "Commander, it sounds like something's calling back." I told him it was interference. That's the official term, interference. But inside, I knew better. Or maybe I just wanted to believe I knew better. It's easier to lie when you convince yourself first. Langford's eyes lit up at the report. He leaned over the console, muttering, "Yes, yes, just as predicted." Predicted. That word chilled me. How do you predict something no one should even know exists? The further we sank, the stranger things became. Shadows passed outside the viewports. Too large, too deliberate to be tricks of light. Once, I swear I saw a shape press against the glass. A pale hand, or a fin, or something in between. But when I blinked, it was gone. So I told myself it had never been there. Nightmares found me even while I was awake. I'd close my eyes for just a second, and in that sliver of darkness, I'd see figures moving through water, dragging themselves along the trench walls. And every time they turned their heads toward me, not the Orpheus, me, I know what you're thinking. Pressure sickness, nerves, imagination. That's what I told myself too. But here's the part I can't explain. Harris saw them too. One night he cornered me outside the control room, his face pale, sweat dripping. He whispered, "Commander, they're following us. They know we're here." His voice cracked like a child's. I told him to sleep. I told him he was hallucinating. But the truth, I was relieved someone else had seen them. At least my madness wasn't mine alone. Diaz confronted Langford during the 5th day of descent. I overheard them in the mess, voices low but sharp. "Why the hell do you have clearance codes higher than the captain?" Diaz hissed. Langford didn't even flinch. He said, "Because rank means nothing down here. Knowledge does." Then he looked straight at me, as if daring me to challenge him. I didn't. I wish I could tell you why. The days blurred into each other. Steel, corridors, recycled air, the constant drip of condensation down bulkheads like sweat on a dying man's face. Sleep meant nothing. Time meant nothing. Only the descent mattered. Then came the night we reached the trench floor. Harris was at his station, pale, eyes darting between screens. "Contact," he whispered. "Large, moving." His fingers trembled as he pointed to the sonar display. A shape bloomed across the monitor, far larger than any submarine, larger than anything human engineering could build. Langford leaned forward, his breath fogging the glass of the screen. "Magnificent," he whispered. His eyes were wide, feverish. "It survived." Those words stuck in my skull like knives. It survived, past tense, as if he already knew what was waiting for us, as if this mission wasn't about discovery at all, it was about confirmation. I stared at the sonar image, my chest tight. The shape moved again, circling us, slow and deliberate, like a predator savoring the moment before the strike. The crew panicked. Harris stammered that the equipment must be malfunctioning. Diaz cursed under his breath, fists clenched, muttering about turning back. The captain gave an order. I think he did. But his voice was drowned out by the groaning of the hull, louder than ever, as if something outside was pressing, testing. Langford, though, Langford was calm. Too calm. He turned to me with that damn polished smile and said, "Now do you see, Commander? This isn't research. This is containment. Containment." The word chilled me more than the ocean around us. Because if you're containing something, that means it's already here. And worse, it means it wants out. Chapter ends, leading into the breach. You want the truth? Fine, but I should warn you, the truth doesn't stay still. It shifts, like light through water. You'll think you understand what happened, and then it will slip, and suddenly you're drowning again. The breach began with a sound I can't describe properly. Not an explosion, not a crack. Something between a scream and a sigh. The voice of the ocean itself splitting us open. The Orpheus shuddered, metal shrieking, alarms howling. I remember Harris shouting, "Pressure spike! Hull integrity compromised!" His words blurred into static. Water burst through a seam in the aft corridor. Cold, black, merciless. It swallowed Diaz before I even realized he was there. One moment he was cursing at a panel. The next, he was gone, snatched into the dark like a toy swept from a bathtub. Did I try to save him? I tell myself I did. I reached for him. I swear I did. But when I replay it in my head, I see only my hand frozen. Too slow. Too late. Langford didn't panic. Not once. He moved with terrible purpose, dragging a metal case toward the sealed lab at the ship's center. I shouted at him, asked what he was carrying, but he ignored me. His lips moved, whispering words I couldn't hear. I thought at first it was a prayer. But later I realized prayers don't sound like bargains. The lights flickered. In one blink, the corridor was empty. In the next, I saw it. Outside the viewport, circling us. At least, I think I did. A shape too massive to measure, glowing faintly with pulses like a heartbeat. But the longer I stared, the more it changed. Sometimes a beast, with fins dragging like tattered sails. Sometimes a human silhouette, suspended in the water, arms outstretched. And sometimes, this is the part I still can't bear, it looked like me. The Orpheus tilted sharply, throwing us against the bulkheads. Harris screamed into the comms, begging for orders, begging for anything. The captain's voice tried to cut through, but it was warped, drowned by static, then silence. After that, I never heard the captain again. Langford forced the case into the sealed lab, his keycard granting access no one else had. I followed, fury overtaking fear. The lab stank of chemicals and salt, though we were miles below the surface. Strange instruments lined the walls, glowing faintly. And in the center, God help me, there was a tank. Reinforced glass, filled with dark water that seemed deeper than it should have been. Something moved inside. I can't tell you what I saw, or maybe I won't. It's hard to separate those two, isn't it? But I will tell you this. It recognized me. Not with eyes. There were none I could see. But with presence. Like a hand on the back of my neck, pulling me closer. Langford whispered, "It remembers." He pressed his palm against the glass. The thing inside stirred, pressing back. For one terrible moment, I thought the barrier would shatter. I lost control then. I grabbed Langford, shoved him back, screamed at him to shut it down, to destroy whatever this was. He only smiled, always that smile, and said, "You can't destroy what was here before us. You can only keep it sleeping." Sleeping. The word twisted in my head, because if it was sleeping, that meant it could wake. And if it could wake, the hull groaned again, louder, closer, cracks spiderwebbed across the lab ceiling. I slammed the emergency release, flooding the chamber with alarms. Langford shouted, anger, not fear, as the case slipped from his hands and vanished into the water rising around our boots. Here's where things get uncertain. Maybe I opened the wrong valve. Maybe I sabotaged the containment on purpose. Or maybe it was already too late, and I'm just flattering myself by pretending I had a choice. The lab burst open, water crashing in, dragging Langford toward the tank. He didn't fight. He reached for it, smiling as the dark swallowed him whole. I ran. Or maybe I floated. Memory breaks apart here, splinters into pieces. One moment the Orpheus was whole, the next it was collapsing in on itself, pressure chewing steel like paper. Harris was gone. The crew, gone. I found myself in the escape pod, though I don't remember climbing in. My hands shook as I slammed the release, the pod detaching with a jolt. Through the viewport, I saw the Orpheus twisting, groaning, crushed like a can beneath the ocean's fist, and circling it, that shape, larger now, brighter, or maybe it was closer. For a moment, I swear I saw faces inside it. Diaz, Harris, even Langford, eyes wide, mouths moving in silence. But then it was gone, or maybe I blinked, and I was alone again. The ascent was agony. Every second I expected the pod to implode, every creak a death sentence. I don't remember surfacing, just the sudden glare of floodlights, the rough hands dragging me out, the taste of salt and blood in my mouth. The debrief that followed was worse. Questions I couldn't answer, or wouldn't. What caused the breach? Where is Dr. Langford? What did you encounter? I gave them fragments, lies dressed as half-truths. They wrote it all down, nodding like they believed me, but I saw the doubt in their eyes, and I never told them about the thing in the tank, or how it knew me. Now I sit here, talking to you, and I can still hear it. At night, when the world is quiet, I hear the hull creak. Not the Orpheus's hull. It's gone, crushed miles below, but the sound follows me like an echo I can't escape. Sometimes I wake with salt water in my throat. Sometimes I dream of Langford, his smile sharp as glass, whispering, "It's only sleeping." And sometimes, this is the part I've never said aloud, I wonder if I ever really left the trench at all. Maybe I drowned down there. Maybe everything since has been a trick. A story I tell myself to pretend I'm still human. But whether I'm here with you, or still sinking in that blackness, one truth remains. The Orpheus is still below, and maybe so am I. Story number 2. They said nothing lives that deep, but they were wrong. I know, because I buried something there myself. And now, every time I close my eyes, I don't dream. I remember. The problem is, those memories aren't mine. You won't believe me when I say this, but the deeper you sink into the ocean, the less it feels like water, and the more it feels like time itself is closing in on you. That's what I told myself the first night I boarded the vessel, though I never said it out loud, of course. If the captain, or expedition leader as he preferred to be called, had heard me, he would have written it down in that little logbook he kept tucked beneath his arm. He already didn't trust me. No need to give him more reasons. The mission had been presented as science. Pure, sterile, detached science. Collecting core samples from the trench wall, they said. Mapping fault lines. A routine dive. Nothing dangerous. Nothing extraordinary. Except, of course, none of that was true. Not completely. And if I'm honest, and I don't really want to be, none of us were really here for data. The air inside the ship carried the staleness of recycled breath and cold metal. Everything rattled. The fluorescent lights, the thin steel walls, even the captain's voice as he gave orders. I tried to convince myself the tremors were just from engines, vibrations, physics I couldn't pretend to understand. But even then, in those first hours, the noises had a rhythm. Too deliberate, too close to language. Check your station, the captain said, not looking at me. He never looked at me longer than a second. Just enough to make sure I wasn't breaking something, then eyes back on his dials. His distrust came in fragments. A tightening of his jaw when I walked past. The way he locked certain doors when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I wondered if he knew why I was really here, or if he just sensed it. I kept insisting to myself everything's fine, perfectly normal, but normal things don't breathe. And I swear, when I pressed my palm against the vessel's wall, I felt it push back, like a slow inhale rising from somewhere beyond the steel. We began the descent at dawn. Not that dawn mattered 2 miles above a trench in the middle of nowhere, but the captain insisted on keeping schedules. He liked things orderly, predictable, which is ironic, considering where we were going. At first, the water was a cloudy blue, streaked with light. Then it thickened into green, then black. The ocean swallowed the last traces of sky, as though it had been waiting. Pressure shuddered around us. The vessel groaned like an animal made of metal and rivets, straining against the weight. "Don't touch the instruments," the captain said suddenly. "I wasn't," I answered too quickly. He glanced at me, eyebrow raised before turning back. "I know what you hear," he muttered, almost to himself. That line should have terrified me, but instead it irritated me, because he was wrong. He didn't know, not yet. The sonar pinged in steady intervals, clean mechanical beeps. But then, between the pulses, something whispered. Just a faint distortion at first, easy to dismiss. Static, echo, nothing, except it wasn't nothing. It was syllables. They pressed into my ears with a cadence too intentional to ignore. "Routine interference," I said, maybe louder than I should have. My voice cracked against the hum of machinery. The captain didn't answer. He only wrote something in his logbook, pen scratching slow and deliberate. Every sound after that seemed sharpened. The groan of the hull became a sigh. The bubbles sliding past the windows resembled drifting hands. I caught myself staring too long, searching for shapes in the dark. The abyss has a way of pulling your gaze, like it wants you to forget there's anything else worth seeing. The captain finally broke the silence. "You're too quiet. I thought you didn't like me talking." He smirked, not kindly. "Depends on what you'd say." I didn't answer. I couldn't. If I told him what I really heard in the static, he'd write more notes, lock more doors, maybe even turn the vessel around. And I couldn't have that, not when we were so close. The descent stretched on for hours. The clock said it was 3. My body swore it was longer. Down there, time had no shape. Every second felt like it might be the last before the hull collapsed inward. Then the lights flickered, once, twice. A brief blackout. When they returned, I wasn't entirely sure the captain was in the same position as before. Maybe he'd shifted, or maybe the dark had rearranged him. I thought I saw his hand pressed against the glass, fingers splayed wide. But when I blinked, he was seated again, writing in his log. System glitch, I muttered, throat dry. He didn't argue, but his pen never stopped moving. Pressure continued to climb, numbers flashing red on the gauge. He should have called for a pause, leveled us, recalibrated, but he didn't. He just stared forward, jaw clenched, like he was daring the ocean to crush us, or maybe daring me to admit what I heard. The sonar pinged again. This time, the static wasn't faint. It surged, filling the cabin with broken syllables. I swear, I heard my name, I laughed. Too quickly, too sharply. Echo, that's all. Perfectly normal. The captain didn't laugh. He looked at me, finally, really looked, and his eyes weren't accusing. They were scared, not of the sound, of me. That was when I realized he'd already decided. I was the variable he couldn't control, and in his book, that meant danger. Still, I kept smiling, pretending calm, even as my palms dripped sweat onto the controls. Because what else could I do? Admit the abyss was speaking. Admit I'd heard it before. No, not yet. So I leaned back, forced my eyes away from the dark glass and whispered to myself, it's just the ocean, just water pressing in, just machines groaning. But the abyss doesn't like being dismissed. And as we dropped deeper, the whispers coiled tighter, syllables brushing against the inside of my skull. The captain turned another dial, and I swear I saw his hand trembling. He didn't speak, neither did I, because the voices had grown clearer, louder, and one of them, God help me, wasn't coming from the sonar at all. It was inside the cabin with us. You'll probably think I'm exaggerating, but silence at the bottom of the ocean isn't silence at all. It's crowded. That was the thought I couldn't shake after the sound. Not the sonar, not the static, the voice. The one that curled inside my skull like it had been waiting for me. Like it knew my name before I remembered it myself. I didn't tell the captain. Not right away. He already looked at me like I was the problem, and maybe I was. But how could I explain the truth without sounding insane? That it wasn't coming through the machines at all. That it was closer than that. He noticed something though. Of course he did. His eyes cut across the dim cabin, lingering on me longer than usual, then darting back to his dials. His silence accused me more than words could. The vessel groaned as pressure deepened, each creak a reminder that we weren't supposed to be here. I tried to convince myself that the voice was just stress, exhaustion, imagination. But exhaustion doesn't whisper syllables in perfect rhythm. Exhaustion doesn't say your name. Systems holding, the captain said finally, though his voice cracked like the metal hull itself. I nodded, staring at the sonar screen. Looks fine to me. But the truth was, the sonar was still moving when it shouldn't have been. The ping lines trembled, reacting not to the walls of the trench, but to something else. Something alive. I wanted to laugh, or maybe scream, because there's no way I should have recognized that rhythm. No way it could have sounded familiar. And yet, the voice came again, low, muffled, but distinct. 3 syllables. My name! I jerked in my seat, heart pounding, eyes darting to the captain. But he didn't move. He didn't even blink. Either he didn't hear it, or, worse, he was pretending not to. Pressure's climbing, he muttered, pen scratching into his logbook. I leaned closer, squinting. He wasn't writing system notes. The letters were too jagged, rushed, and when he angled the page slightly, I caught a word repeated 3 times. Not normal. Everything's fine, I said quickly. Just the hull adjusting. Perfectly normal. He snapped his head toward me, finally meeting my eyes, and I saw it. Fear. Not of the ocean, not of the vessel. Of me. Why are you here? He asked, voice low. I froze. My throat tightened, words sticking like salt water in my lungs. For the mission, I lied. The samples. The mapping. His jaw clenched and he turned away, but I knew he didn't believe me. The voice came again, louder this time. A whisper that wasn't quite human, wasn't quite machine, but somehow carried memory in it. I felt it curl around my ears, slither into the back of my head, echoing with something I had tried, needed to forget. I pressed my palms against the console, sweat slick against the metal. Don't answer it, I told myself. Don't acknowledge it. But acknowledgement isn't always spoken. It's in the way your eyes widen, the way your breathing shifts. And the captain noticed. What did you hear? His tone was sharp now, commanding. Nothing, I said too fast. Just static, pressure interference. His pen scratched again, lying. I wanted to grab the book from his hand, tear the page out, burn it. But instead I forced a laugh, thin and hollow. You're jumpy, Captain. Might want to ease up on the paranoia. But the truth is, paranoia was already eating me alive. Because the voice wasn't fading, it was multiplying, echoes upon echoes, layering, folding, until the cabin felt thick with whispers. And yet somehow, they all carried the same shape, the same intent, the same name. Mine. The captain must have felt the tension because he adjusted the lights, flooding the cabin in harsh fluorescent glare. But even then, shadows seemed to cling in the corners, shifting with the hum of the vessel. I thought I saw a shape once, just for a second, hunched against the far wall. When I blinked, it was gone. Eyes forward, the captain barked. I flinched. I am. No, you're listening. The way he said it chilled me, because he was right. I wasn't looking at the trench walls, or the readings, or the instruments. I was listening like a dog to its master's call, and I hated that it felt right. The voices swelled, no longer whispers but broken phrases. Syllables too fragmented to make sense, yet filled with a rhythm that was all too familiar. Like lullabies half remembered, like prayers twisted inside out. I couldn't stop myself. I muttered under my breath, repeating the sounds as they came. The captain slammed his hand against the console. Stop it! I blinked, startled. What? You were speaking? No, I wasn't. His face tightened. Yes, you were. I wanted to deny it, laugh it off, pretend. But the taste of those syllables was still on my tongue. The abyss was teaching me a language, and I was answering. The captain's pen scratched again, furious, each stroke a verdict. Stop writing about me, I snapped, the words slipping out sharper than intended. He froze, his eyes narrowed, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought he looked afraid not of me, but of what was around me. Another groan shuddered through the vessel. This time it didn't sound like metal, it sounded like breath. The captain adjusted dials, muttering calculations under his breath, pretending to ignore it, pretending to ignore me. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I leaned closer to the glass, staring into the black beyond, certain I would see a face peering back. Nothing. Just dark. Just water. Just silence that wasn't silence. Then the voice hissed again. Not from the sonar, not from the walls. From directly behind me. I spun, but the cabin was empty except for the captain, pen poised mid-scratch, his eyes wide. He'd heard it too this time. For the first time, he didn't write a word. You know that moment when two people hear the same thing, but only one of them admits it. That's when you realize silence can be more dangerous than any scream. That's what it felt like in the cabin, after the whisper. I know the captain heard it. His pen froze mid-stroke, his eyes widened. His throat worked like he was about to speak and then thought better of it. But he said nothing, not a word. I should have felt relief that he finally knew I wasn't imagining it. Instead, dread spread through me, thick and choking, because if he wasn't denying it, then it meant the thing was real. And if it was real, it was closer than either of us had admitted. The vessel moaned around us, Not the ordinary groan of strained metal, but something deeper, more organic, as if the abyss itself was shifting against our hull. I wanted to tell him that we weren't alone down here, that the darkness pressed against us with intention, but every time the words reached my lips, I swallowed them back. Because what if I said it out loud, and the voice answered? "Keep your station," the captain said finally, though his tone had none of its usual sharpness. He sounded brittle. I nodded, forcing my hands to stay steady on the controls. "Everything's fine," I muttered, too quickly, too much like a lie. The sonar pinged, a clean, mechanical sound. Then came the distortion, static warped into syllables, syllables into whispers. I flinched. The captain's knuckles whitened around his pen, but still, he said nothing. It was unbearable. "You heard it, didn't you?" I demanded. His jaw twitched. "Focus on your job." "That's not an answer." "Focus!" His refusal twisted something in me. I wanted to shake him, force him to admit it, because if I was hearing it, and he was hearing it, then maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I wasn't the only one chosen. The voice came again, clearer this time. My name, drawn out like a song. The captain slammed the logbook shut. "It's pressure sickness," he said firmly, as though naming it would make it true. "Auditory hallucinations. Happens on long dives." I stared at him, incredulous. "Then why did you stop writing when you heard it?" His mouth opened, then closed. He looked away. The silence between us was worse than the whispers, because silence left room for them to crawl in, to swell, to coil tight around my brain. I pressed my palms to my ears, but that didn't help. The voice wasn't outside, it was inside, weaving between my thoughts, stitching itself to my memories. And that's when it got worse, because it didn't just say my name anymore, it said hers. My throat clenched. No, not here, not now. I'd buried that memory, sunk it so deep it should never have surfaced again. Yet, here it was, dredged up by the abyss, spoken in a voice that didn't belong to her but still carried her echo. "Stop it," I whispered. The captain glanced at me sharply. "What?" "Not you." My nails dug crescents into my palms. "Them." He went pale, but he didn't argue. For the first time, I think he believed me. Not because he wanted to, but because denying it had become impossible. The vessel shuddered. Lights flickered, dimmed, then stabilized. But something had shifted. I swear the cabin felt smaller, the air thinner. The pressure wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside, pressing against my chest, my skull, my sanity. The captain leaned forward, voice low, urgent. "Listen to me. Don't engage with it. Don't answer." I laughed, though it came out cracked and hollow. "You think I want this?" "You're already feeding it," he said. "I can see it in your eyes." I wanted to argue, but the truth was already clawing at me, because part of me was answering. Not aloud, not yet, but in thought, in memory. In the way I leaned closer to the whispers, even as I told myself to pull away. The sonar pulsed again. This time the distortion didn't fade, it lingered. A stream of syllables, low and rhythmic like chanting. The captain gripped the logbook so tightly I thought the cover would tear. He was shaking his head over and over, whispering, "No, no, no," and I found myself whispering along with it. The realization hit like ice. I wasn't just hearing the words, I was repeating them. My lips moved before I realized it, echoing the rhythm, syllable for syllable. "Stop," the captain barked. His voice cracked with desperation. "I'm not—" I cut myself off. Because I was. I clamped my mouth shut, but the taste of those sounds lingered, sour and metallic on my tongue. The abyss wasn't just speaking anymore. It was teaching, and I was learning. The captain slammed his fist against the console. I should end this dive. No! The word tore out of me, raw and frantic, too revealing. He stared at me, suspicion sharpening his fear. Why are you really here? For the mission, I shouted, but the words sounded empty, flimsy even to my own ears. He didn't answer. He just stared, unblinking, as if weighing whether I was more dangerous than the abyss itself. The voice came again, louder now, filling every corner of the cabin. And this time, it wasn't alone. It layered, multiplied, a chorus of whispers speaking in unison, pressing against us from all directions. The captain covered his ears, eyes wide. I didn't. I leaned in, because beneath the chorus, I could hear one thread meant only for me, and God help me, it sounded like comfort. The captain's voice broke through, trembling with panic. If you keep listening, it'll take you. I smiled, small, involuntary. Maybe that's the point. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His face drained of color. And in that moment, I realized something terrible. He wasn't afraid of the abyss. He was afraid of what it was turning me into. The voices swelled again, shaking the very walls. The vessel groaned, lights sputtered. I gripped the console, not in fear, but in anticipation, because the abyss was calling. And for the first time, I wanted to answer. Story number 3. I shouldn't be alive to tell this. And yet, if I really am alive, then why do I keep coughing up seawater every night? I never heard the voice. That's what I tell myself. That's what I've told every committee, every tribunal, every sleepless night when the static comes back to me. But if I never heard it, then why is it whispering even now? Through the walls, through my teeth, through the salt still crusted in my hair. You'll decide for yourself whether you believe me. Just remember, I never asked to go down there. They chose me. It began with an invitation sealed in a black envelope. That's not a metaphor. It was black paper, wax stamped, and carried by a courier who didn't speak a word. When I opened it, I thought at first it was a mistake. My name, Commander Nathaniel Barnes, printed on government letterhead, summoning me to Naval Intelligence Headquarters. The letter said scientific research, but I swear to you, when I first read it, the words said confession. By the time I blinked, they'd changed. Perhaps I was tired, or perhaps something wanted me there. The meeting was brief, almost perfunctory. A trench had been mapped in the mid-Atlantic, deeper than our charts accounted for. Seismographs had picked up activity. I was told it was probably nothing. Yet the folder slid across the desk contained grainy spectrograms, strange peaks and valleys that didn't match earthquakes or whale songs. A signal, one officer muttered, but another quickly corrected him. Not a signal, just sound. The distinction mattered to them. I don't know why, or maybe I do, and I've just chosen to forget. They introduced the team in stages, though only one face ever stuck with me. Dr. Alina Morrow, a linguist. Not a biologist, not a physicist, a linguist. What business did she have on a vessel designed for deep-sea operations? Her presence didn't make sense, and yet she carried herself like she belonged more than any of us. She had this way of looking at people, as if she was already translating you into some other language. I told myself I never trusted her, and yet I can still recall the exact shape of her smile. Our first briefing aboard the ship was ordinary, at least on the surface. Scientists buzzing with excitement, divers swapping rumors about what the sound could be. Some thought a new species of leviathan, others whispered about Russian experiments. I stood apart, aloof, detached. That's what I'll claim. And yet, I can recite the very words Alina spoke about, patterns in the intervals, almost like syntax. Words I had no reason to memorize. Words I shouldn't remember so clearly if I truly hadn't been listening. The first time they played the recording for us, the the room fell silent. At first it was just static, like a storm caught on tape, the ocean grinding against itself. Then came the undertones, deep groaning pulses that rose and fell with uncanny rhythm. Some of the scientists leaned closer, fascinated. I should have dismissed it as mechanical noise. Instead, I felt my stomach tighten because hidden in the churn was intention. It wasn't random. It was reaching upward, as if to be heard. I said it wasn't language. I said it couldn't be. But even then, I think I already knew. Alina spoke up, her voice steady. It's structured. There are repetitions, inflections. This isn't just sound, it's communication. The others shifted uncomfortably. No one wanted to call it a voice, but she did. And I hated her certainty. Or maybe I envied it. I told myself she was wrong. I told myself she was dangerous. And yet here I am, repeating her translations word for word, as if they were carved into me. You see how this doesn't add up? You see why I'm not the witness you want me to be. I claimed at the time that I barely spoke to Alina, that she was just another scientist, one I distrusted from the start. But then why do I remember the sound of her footsteps on deck at night? Why can I picture the way her hair caught the lantern light when we stood alone by the rail? Her voice low, asking me if I heard it too. Either those conversations never happened, and my mind is fabricating them, or they did, and I've been lying ever since. You'll have to choose which possibility unsettles you more. Sleep grew difficult after that. I'd lie in my bunk, headphones pressed to my ears, playing the recording over and over. I told myself it was for analysis, for command. But it wasn't. It was compulsion. Every groan, every pulse, shaping itself into syllables only I seemed to hear. Sometimes I thought I caught words. Sometimes I thought I understood them. And sometimes I'd find myself staring at the dark porthole, convinced something was staring back. The crew noticed. They grew uneasy around me. I told myself I still commanded their respect, but in truth they whispered. The divers muttered about bad luck. The technicians claimed the signal carried undertones that made their teeth ache. One man refused to listen at all, said it wasn't sound, it was invitation. Still, discipline held. Well, that's what I'll claim, because if I admit the fractures, then I admit I wasn't in control. And if I wasn't in control, then maybe none of what I'm telling you is real. I remember our final briefing before the dive. The trench loomed beneath us. Black, endless, a scar in the ocean floor. The scientists ran through checklists. The divers strapped into gear. And Alina, she smiled at me. It wasn't kindness, not exactly. More like recognition, as if she knew what I'd already decided, though I hadn't admitted it to myself yet. She leaned close, whispered something I won't repeat. Not because I've forgotten, but because I can't let you know what it was. Some words should stay submerged, and yet they rise. Even now, the voice didn't call all of us. Not really, it called me. It had always called me. And that night, standing on the deck with the trench yawning below, I realized I already knew what it wanted. I told you I didn't want to go down there. That's the truth. Or at least the version of it I've decided to keep. But then, in the very next breath, I remember telling the captain of the vessel that I had to be on the dive crew. Which one is true? I don't know anymore. Maybe neither. Maybe the voice chose me before I could ever refuse. That's why I keep insisting, don't believe everything I say. I don't even believe it myself. We boarded the submersible at midnight. The air smelled of rust, oil, and stale coffee. Familiar scents, but somehow corrupted down here in the middle of the Atlantic. The walls were close, pressing in, lined with dials that trembled as though nervous themselves. I told the men I was steady, calm. Yet I remember staring at my own hands on the ladder and noticing the faintest tremor. It's possible the others saw it too, though no one dared speak. Their silence wasn't respect, it was fear. Chief Diver Holt joined us then, a mountain of a man, scars along his forearms, jaw clenched in discipline. I had served with him once before, in calmer seas. Back then, I trusted him with my life. On this mission, though, something about him unsettled me. Maybe the way his eyes lingered whenever the recordings played. Maybe how his breathing slowed as if he was listening for something no one else could hear. I'll admit it, I envied Holt, because if the voice was reaching out, it favored him too, and that I could not abide. We began the descent. Pressure gauges ticked steadily higher, metal groaning like an old ship's spine bending. At first, nothing unusual, just the eternal dark swallowing our lights as the ocean closed in. I told myself I was calm, but then I remember sweat dripping from my brow, my heart hammering too loud for the confined silence. Contradiction again. You see it, don't you? That's the pattern in my words. Calm but trembling, detached but terrified. Even in my own telling, I fracture. Alina sat at the hydrophone console, headphones pressed tight, pencils scratching notes in her book. She murmured to herself, lips moving, catching syllables no one else dared call language. Repetition, inflection, almost imperative. I told the crew she was imagining it. Yet even as I dismissed her, I heard fragments that burned into me. Tones rising like a question, falling like a command. She said them aloud, and though I laughed, I've never forgotten. Ask yourself, if I truly never believed her, why do I still remember her translations word for word? The crew tried to stay composed, but cracks formed quickly. One technician claimed it was feedback, sonar distortion. Another muttered he heard words in his sleep. Holt silenced them with a growl, barked about discipline. But I saw it. His eyes were wide, jaw twitching. He heard it too. They all did. And me? I told myself I heard nothing. I told myself I was immune. Yet here I am, years later, whispering the rhythms into empty rooms. The first jolt nearly threw us from our seats. The lights flickered, red alarms briefly blinking before fading back. Officially, I logged it as turbulence, deep currents shaking the vessel. Unofficially, what I felt was something brushing against us, smooth, deliberate, like fingers dragging across metal. Holt cursed under his breath. Alina looked at me, her pupils wide, as if she expected me to confirm what we both knew but couldn't say. I shook my head. Leadership requires denial after all. I forced myself to look out the small viewing window. At first only blackness, then shapes, or perhaps shadows twisting in the beams of our lamps. Long, impossibly long, tapering into nothing. I blinked, and they were gone. Just shadows, I said aloud. But even as I said it, I thought I heard a laugh behind me. When I turned, no one had spoken. Alina leaned close then, so close I felt her breath. "It knows we are here," she whispered. Those exact words. Don't ask me how I remember them so clearly. Don't ask me why her voice in that moment has never left me. I told her she was fabricating it, projecting human need onto random static. But her eyes, they told me she believed it, and worse, they told me she believed I believed it too. Holt cornered me later, when the others dozed in their harnesses. "You're not telling them everything," he muttered, his face inches from mine. His breath smelled of salt and stale rations. I denied it. Of course I did. A commander must deny, but I can still recall his words precisely. "If you've heard it, Barnes, if you've let it inside, you'll drown us all." Did he really say that? Or did I invent it afterward to excuse what happened later? The line blurs more each time I replay it. Depth readings climbed higher and higher, past what charts had promised. Pressure pressed in like a giant's hand squeezing our little steel coffin. The hull groaned, metal shuddering. Someone said they heard tapping on the outer walls. Steady, rhythmic, impossible at that depth. I told them it was nothing, imagination born of fear. But in truth, I heard it too. And though I've denied it in every report since, part of me tapped back. And then, the lights stabilized. The hum of machinery steadied. We'd reached the trench floor, or so the gauges said. But when I peered through the forward window, I didn't see rock. I didn't see sand. I saw an opening, blacker than the water around it, vast, like jaws waiting to close. My throat went dry. Holt muttered a prayer. Alina simply wrote one word in her notebook, pressing the pencil so hard it broke. Mouth. I told myself it was only the trench. Just geology, a feature of the seafloor. That's the official version. But what I remember, the version I shouldn't tell you, is that it moved. The edges shifted, flexed, and somewhere deep inside, I swear I saw a glimmer. Not light, an eye, the voice didn't wait. It was already inside us, already choosing. And as we hovered before that yawning dark, I realized this wasn't exploration. This was an invitation. The ocean hadn't just opened. It had asked a question, and someone among us would have to answer. I shouldn't even call it a voice. Not really. Voices belong to people, to throats and tongues and air. This thing, it moved through steel, through water, through the marrow of my bones. And yet, when I tell you I heard words, you'll think I've lost my grip. Maybe I have, or maybe you just haven't been deep enough to know what the ocean keeps hidden. We had already slipped past the light. The porthole showed nothing but black, except for the faint, trembling beam of our floodlights. The trench walls, jagged like teeth, closed around us as if we were sliding down the throat of something alive. I remember Dr. Morrow sitting opposite me, her face lit by the glow of her monitor. She typed furiously, headphones pressed to her ears. She looked entranced, like a child hearing a lullaby or a zealot receiving scripture. And here's the part that always snags in my memory. I can't remember if she looked up at me once, or 100 times. I keep replaying it, and it changes each time. Sometimes she never glances up. Other times, she meets my eyes and smiles like she knows exactly what I'm thinking. That's what I mean when I say memory isn't reliable. Especially mine. The signal, or the voice, depending on which part of me you believe, shifted as we went deeper. At first, it was the same repeating pulse the Navy had detected months earlier. Then it stretched, warped, became rhythmic, too deliberate to be static. I asked Harris, our sonar tech, if he was tweaking the feed. He swore he wasn't. His hands shook so badly on the controls I almost believed him. Dr. Morrow finally pulled off her headphones. "It's not random," she whispered. "Then what is it?" I asked. "A greeting." The way she said it, calm, certain, made my skin crawl. How could she know? How could anyone? Now maybe this is where I start to mislead you, because depending on how I tell it, I'm either a man in control, commanding his crew with authority, or I'm a shadow of a commander, doubting everyone, even myself. Truth is, I don't know which version you'd prefer, but I do know this. Alina began writing. Pages and pages of symbols, jagged strokes that looked almost like cuneiform. She claimed the sound carried structure, syntax, that the ocean was speaking in a language older than human civilization. I wanted to call her insane. Instead, I found myself leaning closer, desperate to believe her, because believing meant the madness wasn't mine alone. There was a moment, I swear it, when the voice slipped out of the speakers and into the hull itself. The walls of the sub vibrated like a throat clearing itself. The lights dimmed. Harris muttered a prayer, voice cracking. And Alina, she closed her eyes and whispered back. I told her to stop. She didn't. That's when I realized she wasn't translating the signal. She was answering it. The descent stretched on forever. I can't tell you if it took hours or minutes. Down there, time bends. You measure it not by clocks, but by heartbeats, by the number of times your breath fogs the glass. And in those stretched moments, I began to feel it. Something tugging at us. Not current, not gravity, something intentional, like the trench itself wanted us deeper. I caught Alina staring at me. Her lips moved, but the words weren't for me. Maybe they weren't even hers. And for the first time, I felt truly afraid. Not of the trench, not of the voice, but of the woman sitting 3 feet away. Now let me confess something ugly. I thought about cutting the dive short, calling it off, ordering Harris to take us up, but then I thought of what the Navy would say, that Barnes lost his nerve, that Barnes turned back, and beneath that fear of failure was something worse. Curiosity. What if she was right? What if the ocean wasn't empty? I couldn't let her be the only one who heard, so I gave the order. Keep descending. At some depth I can't recall, the voice stopped being sound. It became presence. The kind of presence you feel in a dark room when someone stands behind you, breathing softly, close enough to touch, but never moving. It pressed against my skull, my chest, even my teeth. Alina whispered, "It knows we're here." And in that moment, I almost believed she and the voice were one. You're probably expecting me to tell you what we found at the bottom. A structure, a creature, a light. That's what stories like this usually give you. A neat revelation. But the truth isn't neat. Sometimes the bottom never comes. Sometimes you descend forever, circling inside the same black throat until you forget what the surface ever looked like. I remember flashes, floodlights sweeping over something massive, something that shouldn't move but did. Carvings in the rock, or were they veins? Harris screaming at us to turn back. Alina pressing her hand against the glass, whispering words that weren't English, weren't human. And then, nothing. Here's the cruel part. I can't tell you if we survived that dive. One version of me says yes. We surfaced, shaken but alive. Another version insists we never came back at all. Maybe I've been speaking to you from the trench this entire time with water filling my lungs. Maybe the voice you've been hearing isn't mine. But whichever version you believe, know this. Something answered us. And once you've heard it, you can't unhear it. Alina leaned close to me in the dark, her breath steady, almost serene. "It isn't calling us," she said. "It's teaching us." I wanted to deny it, to shove her away, but I couldn't, because the words she spoke next weren't hers. They were mine, my own voice, spilling out of her mouth. That was the moment I knew the voice had chosen a vessel, and it wasn't me. We kept sinking. The hull groaned. Harris sobbed quietly into his sleeve. I sat frozen, watching as Alina's eyes glazed over, as if something behind them was shining through. And just before the lights flickered out, she smiled. Not at me, but through me. I swear I heard my own name carried back in the static. Not Barnes, not Commander, my first name, whispered like a secret I had never shared. Tell me, how could the trench know my name? Story number 4. They didn't summon me because I was the best commander. They summoned me because I was the only one willing to keep a secret. And I already failed at that once. They told me it was an honor, but the last time someone said that, I buried half my crew. That's how the summons arrived. No warning, no explanation, just a sealed envelope on my desk and a knock I didn't answer in time. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting anything, honestly. I thought my career was already over. Men like me don't get second chances, not after what happened before. The letterhead was government issue, the kind that makes your stomach turn before you even read it. Confidential, immediate orders. Report to base, not even a signature, just the insignia, cold, unfeeling. And yet I went. I always go. They called it temporary reassignment, a scientific mission, observation and support for deep-sea research. But I'd seen enough of these missions to know science was just the wrapping paper. What was hidden inside, though, that part they never tell you until it's far too late to turn back. When I stepped onto the pier, the vessel was waiting like a shadow, massive, hunched, painted in a grey that seemed to drink in the light. No flags, no markings. A ship pretending it didn't exist. The first thing I noticed wasn't the ship though. It was the silence. Too quiet for a working port. No chatter, no clanging tools, no gulls. Just the slap of water against steel and the faint hiss of the wind. They led me aboard, and that's where I met him. I won't give you his name. I've already said too much, but you should know he wasn't supposed to be there, at least not if the orders were real. His presence wasn't written anywhere, yet he carried himself like he belonged more than any of us. A quiet man, sharp eyes, the kind of posture that told you he was always watching. He didn't smile when he saw me, didn't blink much either. Later, I'd tell myself he was just another officer, another cog in the machine. But from the start, I knew he'd be the one I had to watch. The corridors of the ship were narrow, too narrow, bulkheads sweating rust, lights flickering with that low electric hum that sinks into your bones. You don't breathe on ships like that. You ration air, shallow and careful. Every sound echoes. Every footstep reminds you how thin the walls are between you and the black water. The crew barely spoke to me. A few nods, a muttered "sir," nothing more. Their eyes slid past like I was already a ghost. That's when suspicion set in. Were they briefed about me? Did they know something I didn't? Or maybe they knew exactly why I'd been chosen. That first night I couldn't sleep. The hum of the ship kept me awake, steady as a heartbeat. I walked the lower decks, alone, or at least I thought I was alone. That's when I saw him again. The quiet officer. He stood at the far end of the hall, motionless, his face half in shadow. "Can't sleep?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He tilted his head, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, without a word, he stepped into a side corridor and vanished. I told myself it didn't matter, that he was just another man with nerves, but the image stuck. The way he looked through me instead of at me. The next morning, the captain briefed us. He was a grey figure, expressionless, reciting protocols like scripture. Depths, pressure tolerances, contingency drills, all delivered in a voice too steady to trust. And never, not once, did he explain the real purpose of the mission. I raised a hand, asked the question everyone else avoided. "What exactly are we looking for down there?" He paused, too long, then gave me a smile so thin it almost wasn't there. "Observation," he said. Nothing more, but his eyes darted, just briefly, to the quiet officer in the corner. And that was enough to tell me the truth. There was something they weren't saying. Days blurred after that. The crew moved like shadows, efficient but distant. The quiet officer was everywhere. Mess hall, engine room, control deck, always standing just close enough to remind me he hadn't forgotten I existed. And then, little things began to unsettle me. My bunk shifted at night, as though someone sat at the edge while I slept. A whisper in the vents, too faint to catch, gone the moment I leaned closer. Paperwork on my desk rearranged. My pen moved an inch to the left. Harmless things. Except harmless things don't gnaw at you like that. I confronted him once, caught him by the observation deck, staring out at the waves. "You've been following me," I said. He didn't look at me, just pressed his hand against the glass, eyes fixed on the endless black sea. "No one's following you," he said quietly. "You just haven't stopped running." That was all. He left before I could demand what he meant, but his words stuck, wormed their way deeper every hour. Running from what? From who? I tried to remind myself this was a mission like any other. Orders, execution, return. Simple. But nothing about it felt simple. And deep down I knew I wasn't chosen for my skill. I wasn't even chosen for my loyalty. They picked me because I was already compromised. Because I'd already learned how to bury the truth and live with the silence. That's the part you need to understand. I wasn't here to explore. I wasn't here to command. I was here to keep a secret. And if you're wondering what that secret was, why the ocean looked more like a graveyard than an open horizon that night, I'll tell you this much. It wasn't the first time I heard voices in the water, but it was the first time I wasn't sure they belonged to the dead. The deeper we went, the less I trusted my own eyes. And maybe that's why I can't swear what really happened down there. I should probably start by saying the descent itself was supposed to be routine. At least, that's what they told us during the briefing. No sudden drops, no turbulence, no surprises. But if you've ever been inside a submarine when it goes dark outside, dark in a way no human eye is built to handle, you know the ocean doesn't care about what's routine. It swallows light, sound, even thoughts, until you're left with only the thrum of machinery and the suspicion that every creak in the hull is the start of a fracture. And maybe I shouldn't admit this, but a part of me wanted something to go wrong. Because if something went wrong, I'd have an excuse. For what? That's harder to explain without giving away too much. Let's just say accidents can be convenient. We passed the 1,000-meter mark and conversation died. Even the usual banter you'd expect between crew members dried up. It was as if the water outside demanded silence, like it could hear us. I sat at my station, pretending to review system checks, but really, I was watching Lieutenant Hale. Hale, my so-called rival. He wasn't my enemy. Not exactly, though if you ask anyone else on that mission, they'd probably tell you we despised each other. The truth is, I couldn't despise him. I envied him. He was younger, sharper, the kind of officer who didn't flinch under pressure. I knew why the brass brought him along. Insurance. If I faltered, he'd take command. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real reason I was there. Not because they trusted me, but because they needed someone to test Hale against. He caught me staring once, just a flick of his eyes, cold and measured, like he knew every thought in my head. "Something on your mind, Commander?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Just making sure you're awake, Lieutenant." "Awake enough," he said, and returned to his console. His tone was neutral, but I heard the undertone. He didn't trust me. Not at all. The silence stretched. Then the whispers began. Not whispers between us. Whispers over the comms. Static, broken syllables, like the ocean itself was speaking through the radio. At first, I thought it was interference from the surface station, but then the words became clearer. "Too deep," a voice muttered. "You shouldn't be here." The crew exchanged nervous glances, but nobody said a word. We were trained to ignore anomalies until confirmed. But Hale, he leaned forward, studying the waveforms on his monitor, like he was dissecting the voice itself. "Could be a bleed from another frequency," he said. I laughed, too quickly. Or maybe someone forgot to pay the electric bill topside. A couple of the junior techs chuckled, but it sounded hollow. Everyone knew the surface station was on a separate encrypted line. No bleed, no interference. Hale didn't laugh at all. Hours passed. Shadows flickered outside the portholes. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can there be shadows without light? That's exactly the question. Shapes moving in a darkness that should have been absolute. I told myself it was tricks of the eye. The human brain trying to impose patterns where there were none. But the longer I stared, the more certain I became that something was out there, watching. At 2200 hours, the first malfunction hit. Engine controls stuttered, plunging the vessel into a sudden bone-rattling shudder. Lights flickered. One of the crew swore he saw a face pressed against the glass of the forward porthole. When I turned, it was gone. "Stabilize," I ordered, trying to keep my voice even. Hale countered, almost immediately. "Check auxiliary power." "Commander, we should surface." "Not an option," I snapped. "We stay on course." The room went quiet. That was the moment the divide became obvious. Some of the crew looked at me, others, at him. Authority fractured, and in that crack, fear began to seep in. Later, alone in my quarters, I couldn't sleep. The walls felt too close, the air recycled and stale. I kept thinking about those whispers, how they seemed to grow louder when I was alone. I tried the radio myself. You know what you did? The voice froze me, because it didn't sound like interference. It sounded like someone I knew, someone I hadn't thought about in years. I killed the radio. When I finally drifted into half sleep, I dreamed of the ocean pressing against the hull. Not water, but hands. Thousands of hands trying to claw their way in. The next morning, Hale confronted me in the mess. You heard it, didn't you? He asked quietly, while the others pretended not to listen. I played dumb. Heard what? The voice. Last night I hesitated just a fraction too long. His lips tightened. You can lie to them, Commander, but don't lie to me. It was the way he said it, like he already knew, like he'd been waiting for me to confirm something I hadn't even admitted to myself. The descent grew worse. Temperatures dropped, condensation beading on steel walls. Crew members reported nightmares, similar ones, involving drowning or being pulled through the walls. Hale kept pushing for answers, needling me, probing at old wounds I didn't want opened. And then came the incident. We were at maximum depth when the alarms shrieked. Pressure spikes, hull strain. The crew scrambled, chaos flooding the control room. Amid the shouting, I saw Hale standing perfectly still, watching me instead of the monitors. Tell them the truth, he whispered. I lunged at him, maybe to shut him up, maybe because I thought he was going to sabotage the controls. I don't know. The memory fractures there. One moment we were grappling, the next he was gone. Gone. The crew demanded to know what happened. I said he slipped, that the lurch of the sub threw him, that he fell. But here's the thing. There was nowhere to fall. Not really, unless the abyss opened up and swallowed him whole. The vessel stabilized eventually, though the crew was shaken. They avoided my eyes, spoke in hushed tones. I told them Hale must have been caught in the pressure lock when it sealed. I told them a lot of things. The truth? The truth is harder, because I can still feel the weight of his hand in mine, the moment before he disappeared. I swear I didn't let go. I swear I didn't push. But every time I close my eyes, I hear his voice echoing through the radio, clearer now, as though the ocean itself preserved him. You did this. And maybe he's right. If I told you I made it back to the surface, would you believe me? Because some days, even I don't. That's the part nobody understands. Silence isn't empty. It's heavy. It's pressure. The same as the trench pressing down on the hull until it warps steel and bone. I thought breaking the surface would be freedom, sunlight, proof I'd survived. Instead, it felt like another layer of the abyss. Just thinner, just quieter. When the submarine finally rose, we were fewer than we'd started. I gave the official report in a voice that didn't sound like mine, scribbled my signature at the bottom, and they let me walk out. No investigation, no trial, not even a reprimand. Strange, isn't it? Men vanish under my command. Systems fail, and somehow I'm the one survivor. You'd think someone would ask questions, unless they already knew the answers, unless they never expected any of us to return. I told myself I'd forget it, file it away, seal it under classified, and let time bury it. But silence doesn't bury anything, it preserves. And every night when the house creaks or the pipes groan, I hear the abyss again. I hear him. Hale. His voice crawls through the vents, through the radio I keep unplugged, sometimes even through my own thoughts. He doesn't accuse outright anymore. He just waits. That's worse somehow, because if he shouted I could deny it. But silence forces me to fill it. And whatever I fill it with feels like confession. I know what you're wondering. Did I kill him? Did I push him? Let me tell you something no one wants to admit. Intent matters less than result. If I thought about it, even for a second, then maybe it doesn't matter whether my hand opened or the abyss pulled him down. The silence doesn't care. It only remembers. The first time I tried to ignore it, I sat in my kitchen, lights off, drink in hand. I thought if I drowned the voice in alcohol, it would fade. Instead, the static from the old radio on the counter flickered to life. No power, no batteries, and still, too deep. I smashed it, of course. But here's the part I can't explain. The fragments kept whispering. Shards of glass, twisted wire, hissing like they were alive. After that, I stopped sleeping. I'd sit awake, every shadow stretching too long, every silence swelling until it pressed against my eardrums. I kept seeing watermarks spreading on the walls, like the ocean had followed me up, leaking through the plaster. Once I swore I saw a pale hand press through the wallpaper, fingers straining for release. And then there was the mirror. I was brushing my teeth, and when I looked up, Hale was there, not behind me, instead of me. His face, his eyes, his steady calm, all framed where mine should have been. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. I smashed that too. But reflections don't die. By the time they called me back in for debrief, I was already unraveling. The officials across the table looked at me with blank eyes, took notes I'll never see, and asked about the mission. I gave them what they wanted: mechanical failures, tragic accidents, nothing supernatural, nothing psychological. They nodded like it matched their expectations. But one of them, a woman in the corner, never looked down at her notes. She just stared. And right before I left, she leaned forward and whispered. Not to me, not really, but to the silence around us. Still too deep. I didn't go home after that. I drove until the roads narrowed, until the sea came into view again. I thought maybe if I stood on the shore, I could convince myself it was just water, just salt and tide and nothing more. But the waves, they didn't sound right. You ever notice how the ocean should roar, should crash and tumble? This wasn't like that. It was quiet, steady, like breathing. In, out, waiting, and I swear, God help me, I saw lights beneath the surface. Not boats, not stars, lights, moving in patterns, slow and deliberate, like eyes blinking open after a long sleep. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. I thought distance would save me, but silence doesn't measure in miles. It measures in guilt. Now I sit here, speaking into this recorder, hoping that maybe telling you will free me. That's the lie I cling to, because if I don't speak, the silence grows heavier, and if I do speak, it listens. Sometimes I wonder if I ever made it out at all. What if I'm still down there, hallucinating the surface, trapped in a loop of ascent that never ends? What if this, me talking to you now, isn't survival but punishment? I hear footsteps outside the door sometimes, slow, dragging, wet. When I open it, there's nothing, but the floorboards creak with water weight, and the air smells of rusted metal, like the sub's hull. Last night, I woke to find the bed damp, sheets clinging to my skin. My throat tasted of salt, and on the wall above me, written in condensation, were words I'll never scrub away. You let go. I didn't. I swear I didn't. But swearing means nothing to silence. It just waits. It waits for me to stop talking, so it can press back in, heavier than before. That's why I keep recording. Because the moment I stop, long pause, static crackle. Do you hear that? Another pause, faint knocking sound. No, it's not knocking. It's deeper than that. Slower, like the hull flexing, like the trench pressing against the walls again. Oh God, I think I understand now. The abyss doesn't stay beneath the waves. Once you've been summoned, once you've heard it, the silence follows. And if you're listening to this, really listening, then maybe it's already inside you too. So tell me, when you close your eyes tonight and the silence grows too heavy, will you still believe me when I say I didn't mean to let him fall? Or will you hear his voice whispering through the dark, "You did this"? Story number. I swear to you, I never wanted to open it. But then again, I also swore I didn't know what would happen when I did. Both are lies. And maybe that's the only truth I can give you tonight. I need you to believe me when I say this. I never wanted the box. And yet, I can remember the exact shade of green on the velvet cloth that covered it. The way the light struck its corners like it had been waiting for me. See, that's the first contradiction. If I never wanted it, why do I remember every single detail? Why does it still replay in my head like film burned onto the inside of my skull? The auction wasn't supposed to mean anything. Just another Saturday in that sterile hall, rows of numbered paddles, a faint stink of old wood and dust. I'd gone for a chair, maybe a desk, nothing more. That's the story I tell myself. But the truth, at least the truth I'm willing to share, is that my family's estate had been tied to the auction. Items from the Barnes lineage, curiosities, the program called them. Most of it was junk, but the box was different. When they wheeled it out, even the air changed. It wasn't dramatic, no thunderclap, no lights flickering, just this quiet, like the hum of the fluorescent bulbs thinned, like everyone forgot to breathe for half a second. That's when I should have left. That's when I should have looked away, but I didn't. The auctioneer cleared his throat and gave this little speech. Not the usual spiel, no talk of provenance, no gushing over craftsmanship. Instead, his voice dropped into something slower, practiced, almost ceremonial. Lot 147, a sealed container, provenance uncertain, catalogued among the Barnes holdings, though its record has been misplaced. Do I hear an opening bid? That's all. No explanation of what it was made of, no age estimate, no history, just a sealed container. But the way he said it, like the words themselves were a ritual, set something crawling in my chest. I should tell you what it looked like, right? That would be the honest thing to do. But every time I try, the description slips away like it refuses to stay put in my memory. I can tell you it was dark, maybe wood, maybe stone, heavy, bound by a lock I never recognized, covered in symbols, or maybe scratches. I don't know, and yet I remember how cold it looked, even under those hot auction lights. I keep insisting I didn't want it, but when the first hand went up, mine followed before I realized. I told myself it was instinct, that I wanted to drive the price up, nothing more. But the truth is, I couldn't stop staring. It wasn't the kind of desire you feel when you want something shiny or rare. It was need, a hunger, quiet but sharp, whispering that the box had been waiting for me specifically. The bidding war was short, 3 people, then 2, then just me. Every time the gavel almost fell, I felt a cold panic, like losing it would cost me more than money. My paddle rose again and again, my voice tight, my breaths shallow. When the final strike of the gavel echoed, I thought I'd won something monumental, but the sound was hollow, like a coffin lid shutting. The auctioneer smiled, or maybe smirked. His eyes found me in the crowd, and it felt like he'd been expecting me all along. Not in the friendly way an auctioneer notices a bidder, but in a way that made my stomach twist. Like this was less a sale, more a handoff. His handshake afterward was colder than it should have been, colder than skin ever has a right to be. He leaned in, too close, and whispered something I didn't catch. I tell myself it was just thanks, or maybe a note about delivery. But sometimes, when I replay it in my head, it sounds like another language. Something guttural, not meant for my ears. Do you see how my story already doesn't line up? I claim I never wanted it, yet I remember every second. I say I couldn't make out his words, but I still hear them when I try to sleep. That's what I mean when I say you shouldn't trust me fully. I can't even trust myself. When I signed the papers, the clerk avoided my eyes. Just a routine process, but she seemed off. Her pen shook when she handed me the receipt. She mumbled something about the records being incomplete. And I should have asked why, but I didn't. Maybe I didn't want the answer. The box arrived at my house that same evening. Too fast for normal delivery, don't you think? Like they wanted it out of their hands as quickly as possible. No packaging, no crate, just the box itself, sitting on my doorstep. No label, no receipt. Only the same velvet cloth, now draped loosely like a shroud. I remember standing there, staring at it, and for the first time I felt a real chill, not just nerves. The street around me was quiet, though it shouldn't have been. Saturday evening, kids playing, dogs barking. But in that moment, silence pressed against me, thick and suffocating. I dragged it inside, told myself it was just wood and metal, nothing more, but my hands tingled like I'd grabbed ice. I should have left it in the hall, should have covered it, should have called someone, anyone. Instead, I placed it right in the center of my study, where I could see it whenever I sat at my desk. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I heard shifting, like something inside was rearranging itself. Too faint to be real, too steady to be ignored. I tried telling myself it was the house settling, or the memory of the auctioneer's voice haunting me. But deep down I knew the box wasn't empty. And if I'm being completely honest with you, and I'm not sure I ever will be, I think I knew that from the moment I first saw it. So when I say I never wanted it, maybe what I really mean is that it wanted me, and maybe I should have walked away. Maybe I should have left it sealed, buried, forgotten. But I didn't, because some part of me, some greedy, curious part, was already planning the night I'd open it. But that's a story for the next chapter. I didn't mean to open it that night. That's the truth I keep clinging to. But the truth has holes, doesn't it? I keep telling myself I was just curious, just inspecting the lock, but my hands worked faster than my mind, almost like I wasn't moving them at all, like the box had already decided. It was just past midnight. The study lamp cast this yellow glow across the desk, and the shadows of the box seemed to swell, stretching beyond its size. I had the windows cracked for air, but no breeze came through, no sound from the street. The silence was thick, pressing against my ears, until all I could hear was my own breath. The lock shouldn't have been easy, but it was. No key, no tools, just pressure from my thumb against a rusted latch, and it gave way with a snap that was far too soft for something that had stayed sealed for centuries. The velvet cloth slid to the floor. I wish I could describe what I saw inside, but every time I try, the memory fogs, not entirely blank, more like staring at a reflection on disturbed water. I know there were carvings, patterns etched in a way that seemed to move under the lamplight. I know there was something inside, wrapped in strips of fabric that weren't fabric at all, more like skin stretched thin. I leaned closer, and that's when it breathed, just once. Faint, but there, like a sigh escaping from something that had been waiting. My stomach dropped, my skin prickled, and yet I didn't close it. I didn't throw it away. I just sat there, staring, my fingers trembling over the edge. Then the whisper came, not loud, not even clear, but it came from inside. At last, I told myself it was my imagination. I'd been awake too long, staring too hard, but the voice wasn't mine. It wasn't in my head. It was behind my ears, curling against the back of my skull. That's when the phone rang. The sudden shrill cut through the silence so violently that I nearly dropped the box. I snatched the receiver, desperate for another human voice. "Mr. Barnes," the voice said. Calm. Even. Too even. "You've opened it." I froze. Didn't answer. My throat locked. "I warned him," the voice continued, quieter now. "But he insisted it would find you. It always finds one." And then the line went dead. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing like an insect in my ear. My first thought was to convince myself it was a prank. Some scammer, some bored kid. But how would they know? How would they time it? When I turned back to the box, the fabric strips were no longer inside. They lay scattered on the desk, curling like dried petals. And beneath them, I glimpsed what they had been hiding. A shape, small enough to fit in my palm, pulsing faintly with light. I didn't touch it, not then. Instead, I pulled the cloth back over the box, shoved it into the corner of the room, and told myself it hadn't happened, that I dreamt it. But even as I tried to lie to myself, the smell lingered. A metallic tang, like blood left too long in the air. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every shadow at the corner of my vision, I thought it was the box. I kept hearing soft scratching, as if something inside was tracing the wood from within. The next morning, I tried to get rid of it. That's what you'd expect, right? Toss it in the trash, leave it at the curb, call the auction house and demand they take it back. I carried it to the front door, but the second I touched the handle, I froze. My chest tightened, breath caught. I couldn't step outside with it. My body refused, so I dragged it back to the study. My palms blistered from its cold edges. That day, I told myself I'd lock it away, maybe in the attic, maybe in the cellar, but each time I lifted it, my steps carried me back to the same spot on the floor, as though it belonged there, as though the study itself was waiting. And here's the part I hate admitting most. By the second night, I didn't just fear it, I wanted it. The whispers grew clearer, weaving into my dreams, curling around my thoughts when I was awake. Secrets, warnings. It was never a voice I recognized, and yet it felt familiar, like something I'd always known but forgotten. I told myself I'd resist, but on the third night, I gave in. I unwrapped the shape inside. It was no artifact, no relic. It was an eye, not human, not animal, too perfect in its symmetry, too deep in its blackness. And it was alive. I knew it because it moved, slowly, deliberately, fixing on me the instant I saw it. And then it blinked. My scream never left my throat. I staggered back, knocking over the chair, clutching at the desk for balance. The eye rolled slightly, then fixed again, its black pupil dilating like it was drinking me in. I should have run. I should have smashed it. But instead I leaned closer. My own reflection wavered in its surface, and I swear, for a split second, it wasn't my reflection at all. It was me, but wrong, hollow-eyed, smiling when I wasn't. That's when the lights went out. The house plunged into darkness, the hum of the lamp dying mid-buzz. Only the faint glow from the eye remained, casting a pale circle across the walls. I backed toward the door, every step heavy, heart hammering in my ribs, and then I heard it again, that voice. Not a whisper this time, but a clear, cold word that filled the room. Closer. And the worst part, I wanted to obey, but that's a confession for the next chapter. You probably think I'm lying when I tell you this, but I didn't walk closer to the eye, at least not willingly. That's what I keep saying, but memory betrays me. It always does. I remember my feet dragging forward even as my mind screamed to stop. My body obeyed something else, some command that didn't come from me. The glow from that thing painted the walls in pale grey. Each shadow stretched long and distorted, like fingers grasping at me. The study was cold, colder than the winter air outside, but sweat slid down my neck. I told myself I'd just look for a moment, just long enough to prove it wasn't real. That's the lie I cling to. When I leaned over the box, the eye blinked again. This time it was slower, deliberate, and I heard the voice. Not in the room, not even behind my ears like before, but inside me, deep, threaded into my own thoughts, wrapping around my words. You've waited. No, I whispered, shaking my head. My voice cracked. No, I didn't, but it didn't sound like me. It sounded hollow, distant, as though I were hearing myself from underwater. The eye shifted, tilting slightly, and suddenly the reflection staring back wasn't mine. It was me, but older, my skin grey, lips cracked, eyes sunken, and yet smiling wider than I ever could. I stumbled back, nearly falling over the chair. My heart raced so fast I thought it would tear through my ribs. I tried to shut the box. My hands shook as I reached for the lid. But the wood, or stone, or whatever it was, wouldn't move. It was heavy before, but now it was immovable, as if rooted to the floor. My fingers slipped. My nails scraped against the surface, but it didn't budge. Then the phone rang again. I froze, the sound cutting sharp through the silence. I snatched the receiver with trembling hands. "Mr. Barnes," the voice said. The same calm, steady voice from the night before. "You let it see you," I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" The line hissed, static flooding the speaker. But beneath it, I heard words, fragments. "It won't. Stop now. Too late. Obeys only hunger." And then, nothing. I slammed the receiver down, chest heaving. But when I turned back, the eye was no longer in the box. It was on the desk. Small, black, wet, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. I swear to you, I didn't touch it. I couldn't have. But there it was, closer, watching. My hand twitched forward. I told myself I was reaching to push it away, but my fingers hovered above it, trembling inches from the surface. That's when the voice filled me again, stronger now. Mine, and my mouth, my own mouth, repeated the word aloud. I staggered back, clutching my lips, horrified. I didn't mean to say it. I didn't choose to say it. But the sound had left my throat all the same. I fled the study, slammed the door, pressed my back against it, heart hammering. For hours I sat there in the hallway, too afraid to move. I thought if I waited long enough, morning light would drive the fear away. But dawn never came. That's the part no one believes. I swear I sat there for what felt like half a day, but the windows stayed black. The clock hands circling endlessly, never striking 6. Time didn't move. Or maybe it moved, but not for me. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. I woke sprawled on the floor, stiff, mouth dry. I told myself it was a nightmare, that I dreamed the whole thing. But when I opened the study door, the box was still there. The cloth was gone, the eye gone too, but the smell lingered. The sharp tang of iron and rot, and scratched into the desk. Deep grooves torn through the wood were words I didn't write. Welcome back. I should have run then. Should have left the house, the city, everything behind. But I didn't. I convinced myself someone was playing a trick. That the calls, the whispers, the reflections, they could all be explained. Humans are good at lying to themselves. I'm the best of all. That night the whispers returned. Louder now, clearer, threading into my dreams, pulling me to the study. I woke standing at the desk, hands pressed flat against the wood, the grooves beneath my palms, and I was smiling. Not because I wanted to, because something else was smiling through me. I know how this sounds. I know you think I'm delusional, broken, unreliable, and maybe I am, but I can't deny what happened next, because when I looked down, the box wasn't empty anymore. There was another eye inside, not the same one, bigger, and it blinked in perfect rhythm with my own. I shut the lid. This time it closed, too easily, like it had never resisted at all. I staggered back, shaking, bile rising in my throat. My reflection in the dark window smiled again, though my face did not. And in the glass, I saw movement behind me. Shadows stretching, curling, like hands reaching out. When I spun around, the study was empty, but I knew better. The box wasn't holding something anymore, it was holding me. And that's the part I can't take back, the part that leads to everything else. But we'll get there in the next chapter. Story number 6. They told me the mine was sealed years ago, that nobody could go inside. And yet, if you stand at the edge of the old shaft at night, you'll hear him, singing, a song I shouldn't know by heart, 'cause he never taught it to me. Or maybe he did and I've just forgotten why. They say the mine was sealed decades ago, but if that's true, then how do I still hear him? The singing doesn't sound like memory. It doesn't sound like imagination. It drifts out of the shaft at night, low and tired, like lungs that should have turned to dust long ago. I don't expect you to believe me. Honestly, half the time I don't believe myself, but the song follows me everywhere, and I'm starting to think it knows me better than I know myself. The mine itself sits on the edge of town, swallowed by weeds and rust. Most people drive past it without looking, the way you avoid eye contact with someone you once loved, but now pretend not to recognize. The chain link fence around the entrance is bent in places, and the danger no trespassing signs are more like invitations than warnings. Kids spray paint their initials there, leave empty bottles, pretend to hear ghosts. They never last longer than a dare. They don't hear what I hear. It's always the same tune, slow, drawn out, each note clinging to the air like damp coal dust. At first I thought I was just remembering. My father used to sing while he worked. Not in the house, never at the table, but down there in the black, chipping his way through the walls of the earth. When he came home, his face smeared grey and his eyes empty, he would be silent. But sometimes when he thought no one was listening, I caught fragments of the song, only fragments. Now the whole thing plays itself in my head at night. And it's perfect, too perfect. How could I know the parts he never sang for me? I tell myself it's imagination, trauma looping itself into music. But then the melody grows louder, layered with the scrape of boots across gravel. I've heard coughing between the verses, wet and rough, like a man breathing through dirt. Sometimes I hear the clink of a pickaxe. The others say it's just the wind catching the shaft, rattling through broken beams. That explanation almost works, until I realize the song always stops when I hum along. And I do hum along. I shouldn't, but I can't help it. My throat catches the rhythm even when I'm trying to stay quiet. Like I've been trained for this, rehearsed it without ever learning. I wake up with my lips moving, half the lyrics still in my mouth. That's when I stop convincing myself it's just a memory. No one likes to talk about the last miner. He was stubborn, they say, bitter, even after the company shut everything down. He claimed the mine was his church, his family, his blood. He wouldn't leave, not even when the shaft was declared unstable. They begged him, threatened him, bribed him, but he just kept digging, singing to himself in the dark. And then, one day the company sealed the mine. Cement, steel, rocks. Buried him alive. That's the legend anyway. People shrug when they tell it, like it's a campfire story. But I remember my father's face whenever the tale came up. His jaw tightened, his lips pressed together. He never said whether the story was true. He never admitted if he knew the man. And yet, the song I hear is the same one my father hummed when he thought I wasn't listening. So maybe the legend isn't just a legend. Maybe my father wasn't humming to himself. Maybe he was echoing someone else. Maybe he carried the mine in his lungs the way coal carried itself under his nails, no matter how much my mother scrubbed him raw at the sink. I've gone back there more times than I should admit, standing just beyond the fence line, gripping the wire until it cuts my palms. The air always smells the same: rust, oil, and the faint sweetness of rotting weeds. And always, after a long silence, comes the song. Never rushed, never desperate, like the voice knows I'll wait for it. The town pretends not to notice me hanging around. I'm the strange one now, the grown child of a miner who never escaped his shadow. They say grief makes you imagine things. That I miss my father so much, I've stitched his voice into the wind. I nod and agree with them because it's easier than arguing. But deep down, I know the difference between imagination and something breathing. Because once, just once, I saw him. It was winter. The snow had piled up in dirty heaps against the fence. I'd gone there late, after drinking more than I should have. The air was sharp enough to make my teeth ache. I stood with my forehead pressed to the fence, waiting. At first, there was nothing but silence. I almost left, but then, from the corner of the shaft, the song began again, clearer than I'd ever heard it. A voice scraping the walls of my skull, pulling me closer, and then the shadow moved. It wasn't quick. It wasn't a trick of light. It was a figure, dark against darker stone, hunched but unmistakably human. The outline swayed with the rhythm of the song, as if keeping time. I stumbled back, the snow crunching beneath my boots, but my eyes never left the shaft. The figure didn't vanish the way shadows do when you blink. It lingered, watching, or maybe waiting. I told myself it couldn't be real, that I was drunk, exhausted, haunted by my own bloodline. But the next morning I woke up with the song still in my throat, the exact note where the figure had stopped singing. My voice cracked in the same place his had, and since then, the tune hasn't left me. Every night it grows louder, crawling out of the shaft, slipping under doors, curling itself into my dreams. I've tried blocking my ears, tried drowning it out with radios and television, but it always finds me. Sometimes I catch myself humming it in public, unaware until people stare. Sometimes children mimic me without realizing what tune I'm carrying. I don't know what that means. Maybe I'm spreading it. Maybe the song isn't just sound, it's infection. All I know is this: if you ever find yourself near the mine and you hear it too, don't sing along. Don't even hum, because once it's inside you, it never leaves. And I wish that was the worst of it. But it isn't. Because what I haven't told anyone, what I swore I would bury with me, is that the shadow I saw that night wasn't a stranger. It looked like my father. And I think he waved at me. You ever hear your own name whispered in a voice that shouldn't exist anymore? That's what broke me. Not the song, not the shadow, but the night the mine called me by name. My full name, the way my mother used to shout it when she was angry. At first, I laughed. I told myself it was just echo, some trick of my brain filling in blanks where sound scattered. But echo doesn't drag out syllables with that much venom. Echo doesn't pause after the first word, as if waiting for you to answer. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat locked, my body stiffened, but deep inside, I wanted to. That's what terrified me the most. The truth is, my family was tied to that shaft in ways I've tried my whole life to forget. My father wasn't just any miner. He was the kind who lived underground even when he was home. His body was present at the dinner table, but his soul, that stayed beneath the earth. My mother used to slam plates down, shout that she married a man and not a shadow, but he never flinched. He'd just chew slowly, silently, like he was grinding coal instead of food. When I was a child, he told me bedtime stories, not about princes or dragons, but about the mine. He said the tunnels were veins, pumping black blood into the town above. He'd describe how the darkness thickened the deeper you went, how the air tasted like iron, how the walls sometimes pulsed as if they were alive. "It sings to you if you listen hard enough," he'd whisper. "Every man hears a different song." I thought he was joking back then, but now I hear it too, and it's not funny. It did to us. She used to say she married one man and lost him to another wife, the earth itself. I remember one night after too much whiskey, she grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me until my teeth rattled. "Don't you ever go near that shaft, you hear me?" she cried. "If you go near it, it'll take you too." I promised her I wouldn't, but promises don't last when the dead start singing. That winter night after I saw the shadow, I couldn't stay away. I went back the next evening, then the next, always telling myself it would be the last time. Each night the voice grew clearer, stronger, but it wasn't just the miner's voice anymore. I started hearing other tones, higher, lower, layered beneath the melody like hidden instruments. And then, unmistakably, one of them spoke my name. Daniel. That's me, or at least, I think that's still me. The first time it said my name, I nearly collapsed. The second time, I pressed my palms to my ears. The third time, I whispered back without meaning to, "What do you want?" That was when the coughing started. Deep, wet, rattling coughs. More than one. It sounded like a room full of sick men choking on dust. The voices overlapped, fighting to breathe, fighting to sing. I staggered backward, but even as I fled, the melody twined around my spine. My memories started unraveling after that. I'd wake in the middle of the night with black grit on my tongue. My bed sheets smelled faintly of rust, though I hadn't set foot inside the shaft. Or at least, not that I remember. But here's the part I can't explain. The voices weren't just strangers anymore. They were familiar. I swear one of them was my mother's. She's been gone for years, buried in the churchyard across town. But the voice that rose above the coughing, sharp and commanding, was hers. "Stay away, Daniel," she barked. "Stay away or you'll end up with us." Why would my mother's voice be with them? Why would she be inside the mine? I tried telling myself it was grief, trauma, the brain replaying what it wanted me to hear. But the song isn't memory. It changes every night. Sometimes it slows down. Sometimes it quickens. Sometimes it twists into melodies I've never heard before. I can't be inventing what I don't already know. The worst part is how familiar the new voices feel. A laugh here, a sob there. Once, I could have sworn I heard my own voice echoing back at me, a half-second too late, like the shaft was rehearsing me for something. And then came the night I saw the light. It was faint at first, a dull orange glow flickering inside the shaft. I thought maybe kids had snuck in with flashlights, but the light wasn't steady like a bulb. It pulsed, like a lantern swaying in a hand, like a heartbeat hidden under stone. I moved closer, pressing my face to the chain link. The glow illuminated the outline of figures again, this time more than one. Shadows clustered together, swaying side to side. Their mouths opened and closed in unison, but the song didn't match their lips. It came from deeper, beneath them, as if they were only mouthing the words for someone else. And then, one of them stepped forward. He didn't look ghostly. He didn't shimmer or fade. He looked solid, heavy, like he'd just walked out of the pit after a long shift. His eyes caught the glow, glassy and wet. But what froze me was his jawline. Square. Familiar. My father's. I wanted to scream, to ask him if he was alive, if he was real. But my tongue stuck. My heart thrashed against my ribs. The figure opened his mouth, and in my mother's voice, he spoke. "You put us here." That was when everything collapsed inside me, because deep down, I think I know what happened. The mine wasn't just shut down, it was sealed. And I think I had something to do with it. Don't ask me how. My memory breaks apart every time I get close. I see flashes, a lantern dropping, shouts echoing, the thunder of rocks. My father's hands pushing me toward the exit. My mother's screams bouncing through the tunnels. And me, running, always running, but if they died in there, Why do I still hear them? Why do their voices echo in songs no one else remembers? Unless they never left. Unless I didn't either. I can't shake the thought now. When I walk through town, I see faces that look wrong, blurred, like they belong in the shaft instead. I try to speak to neighbors and their lips move out of sync, mouthing words I can't hear. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the one outside the fence, or if I've been sealed inside with them all along. And tonight, I swear I'll find out, because I just heard something new, something that doesn't belong. A child's laugh, and it sounded exactly like mine did when I was little. You ever feel like your own reflection is singing back at you? That's how it started tonight. I was brushing my teeth, foamy spit in the sink, when I realized the hum in my throat wasn't mine. My reflection's lips were moving a fraction too slow, dragging out the notes like an echo trapped in glass. I shut my mouth, but the reflection kept singing, and I swear, its eyes were darker than mine, so I came back here, back to the shaft, because whether I'm awake or dreaming doesn't matter anymore. The only way out of this is through. The mine has grown louder, not just at night, not just when the air stills. Even in daylight, the song vibrates under my feet, through the gravel and weeds, up into my bones. It isn't one song anymore. It's hundreds of voices tangled together, rising and falling like waves. But they don't clash. They harmonize, as if every voice knows its place in the choir. And I know mine too. I think I've always known. Pieces of memory keep snapping loose inside me. I can't tell if they're real or planted, but they sting the same. I remember standing outside the mine on the day it was sealed. Men in hard hats poured cement into the entrance, steel beams groaning as they welded them shut. My father wasn't among them. My mother wasn't either. They were inside. No one would listen to me. No one asked questions. They just said the mine had been emptied, everyone accounted for. But I remember screaming at them, clawing at the air, yelling that people were still down there. My words bounced off blank faces. Did I dream that? Did I make it up to cover something worse? Because part of me remembers a different version. A version where I helped seal it. A version where my hands pushed the final stone. I don't trust myself anymore. Some nights I think the voices are punishment, echoing out to remind me of what I did. Other nights, I think they're rescue calls, begging me to come back. The worst nights, the ones when sleep claws at me but never holds. I wonder if I never left the mine at all, if I died with them, and everything since has been an illusion stretched thin over the dark. Because tell me this, why can I taste coal dust on my tongue, even when I haven't gone near the shaft in weeks? Why does my pillow smell like damp earth? Why do my hands ache as if they've been gripping a pickaxe all night? Tonight I made a decision. I cut the fence, the chain link peeled back like skin, shrieking in protest. My flashlight shook in my hands as I stepped closer to the sealed entrance. Cement walls cracked like brittle teeth, steel beams rusted and bent, and yet, behind all that ruin, the song seeped through, richer than ever. I pressed my ear to the concrete. The voices swelled. Daniel. Always my name first, always dragging me deeper. Then others followed, voices layered one on top of the other. My father, my mother, men I grew up around, neighbors, even strangers. And then, at the bottom, faint but undeniable, I heard something that froze my blood. My own voice. You don't know horror until you hear yourself begging from behind stone. I slammed the flashlight against the wall. I screamed that I wasn't inside, that I was out here, that they couldn't trick me. But the voice, the me voice, mocked every word. A second too late, like the shaft was a mirror repeating everything I said. And that's when the cracks spread. Concrete split with a thunderous groan. Dust exploded into my lungs. The song surged louder, spilling out like floodwater. My knees buckled, but I crawled closer. desperate to see inside. For a moment, I glimpsed them. A crowd of figures pressed against the dark, faces pale, eyes gleaming. Their mouths moved in perfect unison, 100 throats releasing the same verse. Some of them I knew, some I didn't. And in the middle, hunched but tall, stood my father. His hands dangled at his sides, blackened with soot, but his eyes, God, his eyes, were hollow lanterns. He opened his mouth, and my mother's voice poured out again. "You did this!" The ground shook. Rocks fell. My flashlight flickered out. In the blackness, hands, cold, calloused, heavy, clamped onto my shoulders. I tried to wrench away, but more hands joined, pulling, guiding. My body slid toward the opening as if the mine itself was inhaling me. And the worst part? I didn't resist. Because for the first time, the song wasn't just sound. It was memory. Every note struck something inside me, unlocking doors I'd sealed shut. I remembered the night of the collapse. Not running away, not screaming at men outside, but standing inside the tunnels, holding the lantern as the walls groaned. My father shouting at me to go, my mother shoving me toward the exit, and me hesitating. Because I wanted the mine to take them. I wanted it all to end. The silence at the table, the shouting, the emptiness. I wanted the mine to bury my family so I could breathe without coal in my lungs. And it did. I think I sealed the door myself. I think the cement on my hands that day wasn't an accident. The truth crushes me, but it also frees me. The voices don't scare me anymore. They've been waiting, calling, reminding me where I belong. My place isn't out here in the thin, false light. My place is down there in the dark, carrying the song. And so I'm going. They've been waiting, calling, reminding me where I belong. My place isn't out here in the thin, false light. My place is down there in the dark, carrying the song. And so I'm going. If you're listening to this, if these words ever find you, remember what I said. Once you know the song, it never leaves you. You'll hum it in your sleep. You'll hear it in the wind. You'll taste it in your teeth. And when the time comes, you'll understand what I understand now. The mind doesn't take people. It keeps them. It keeps us. I've set down the recorder. My hands are on the rocks, prying at the crack. Dust fills my lungs, but I'm not coughing. I'm humming. The voices rise to meet me, and the shadow of my father extends his hand. I'll take it this time. And if you hear the song tomorrow night, don't come looking, because if you do, you'll see me in the shaft, and I'll be singing too.